So after we had an agreement with them and they presented to us this 2-year contract with no increase for 2021, after we passed it, authorized the mayor to engage in that contract, the DAC met and they refused to make it a 2-year without an increase for 2021. So they've authorized this. We actually have them signed and ready to execute a 1-year contract, which means council members that the mayor would have to renegotiate with them for year 2021 now. And we have had all over the board increases, no increases. There's no rhyme or reason I can't figure out. We've had other contracts where we've had a fixed price set for 2 years. But I know, as I've mentioned to you before, I think we're in a desperate financial need. I've made that known to the District Advisory Council. We do not have a vote on that. That is made up of townships and municipalities. And the health department is having financial struggles as well. But I ask for your passage of this because we have to be under contract. We cannot put together a health department and actually be certified because they have to be certified here within a year or 2.
Questions for Service Safety Director Pat? I'm passing around the history of the city contribution to the the county health department, and that's from the time starting in 2011 when we basically withdrew from the combined health district because we were paying way more than our fair share at the time. So it just kind of shows you what the increases have been since that time. So this, I assume, was the 2-year their idea? Am I understanding that correctly?
They typically have always had 2-year for us.
Yeah, and they sent us a 2-year contract at first, which they had, as far as we knew, they had agreed to it, but apparently their board hadn't.
It's a little puzzling to me. So,
by the way, this amount of the contract is on a per capita basis, the same as all the townships in other villages pay.
okay. All right, so what's, we take this 2 readings, or do we need to pass this? No, we just need it in place by January 1.
Just in place by January, so we could go to December if you'd like.
Okay, we'll do 2 readings on, well, actually, you know what, is there any issue with suspension, considering we've already passed this once for the amount that we're passing tonight, right?
For next year.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get this out of the way, because I think we're going to have lots of work to do in the last meeting, so I'm going to ask for suspension tonight. And Holly, would you second that, please? All right, so we will ask for suspension on 141-19. Next item is Resolution 142-19 and Ordinance 31-19. This is, again, putting the income tax back on the ballot because of the timing of the March primary, which requires us to have all documentation filed by, I believe, December the 18th. So, Mayor Scheffler, do you want to add anything to that? Talk about maybe adding another meeting to do 3 full readings. Just can't figure out what your plan is.
In order to get 3 readings, we'd have to have a special meeting sometime either before or after December 16th. So I believe that's up to Council President Ohl to figure out what he wants to do with that. We do have, as you all are aware, we started out with a $2.6 million difference between estimated general fund income and estimated general fund expenses. So we have been working diligently to pare that down. We found about $700,000 to cut, mainly from police and fire. And we're continuing to look at every line item in the general fund budget to get down so we're not in default.
Okay.
So we desperately need a city income tax increase.
Okay. but I don't argue that. Thoughts around the room? I mean, you don't have to have a third meeting if you suspend it on second reading. I mean, that's an option. I know it gets kind of goofy this time of year. I'm fine with a third meeting. What is the pleasure of council? Don't everyone speak up at once.
I think we should just get it done.
Sorry,
I think we should just get it done.
Mr. Woodard?
Yeah, I don't really understand what the purpose of worrying about having a special third meeting. I mean, if anybody's going to come before council and discuss it, they'll know about it in time to do it at our next meeting. I think suspending after second reading probably is in order.
Yeah, to your point a little bit, they can always come back in January and February and talk with us as well about it, so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's going to change any council member's decision on how they're going to vote for or against having three readings, so.
Okay. Anyone? Mr. McDaniel?
Yeah, I just want to say, when the mayor talks about reducing this budget by $700,000 in police and fire primarily, what he really means is we're reducing our staffing, because that's where the money really comes from. So our police and fire departments are both significantly impacted by our budget, and we need to get this on the ballot and have the folks consider what they want to do going forward.
And I had talked to the mayor earlier over the weekend and said that I'm willing to be a part of whatever informational position we can go out there, you know, as a council and talk with residents, whether it's, you know, ward by ward meetings or whatever way you would like to use me, and I suspect anyone else sitting around the table in that role to, you know, give us transparent as a look at what we're trying to do. Again, I'm willing to do that, and I suspect all of our colleagues are as well.
Appreciate that.
So is anyone against a two reading? What will happen if we get to December the 16th and we don't get the approval on the suspension, then we will call a meeting. I will actually have a meeting already. Well, we'll need two more council folks, but we'll have a meeting already called for the 17th in the event that we don't pass it on the 16th, unless I'm comfortable that that's not going to happen. So, all right. Don, would you please second 142, and then Holly, you'll be the second on ordinance 3119, please. All right. Next item I have is resolution 14319. That's a resolution to appropriate and fund 247. This is coming through the safety committee. Mr. Hall.
Yeah, just real quickly, actually, I think it's a little bit more than that. I think it's $21,000.
What did I say? If I said 11, I meant 21.
But essentially, we're going to ask for suspending the second and third readings. This is
All right.
obviously close to the end of the year, and it's something that needs to be done. We'll ask Chief Wood to come up and explain this and a walking resolution that we're also going to propose.
Okay. Mr. Ward, Chief Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sent all of council an email today, hopefully explaining this legislation. If you have any questions, please let me know. We knew last year that the budget was going to be tight, coming down to this point in time. Medical supplies is $10,000 shy of what we need. Contractual services, as my email said, something new this year is we're paying our EMS fees out of this. We're a little bit more than 11,000 shy, but I'm moving around some monies in different line items to cover the other shortage. So I need 11,000 in that to cover the EMS dues and fees for the remainder of this year. It's not the only line item that's short, but I'm able to move some of those, like out of training to pay for fuel. We're $5,000 shy in fuel this year. So we're making do with what we've got, but it's extremely tight.
Questions for Chief Ward? I suspect there's no issue.
Okay.
We appreciate the explanation. Stand by, because we're going to have you talk about, well, actually, the next resolution. So we're going to suspend on this one. Who's your second? I assume Jerry?
It would be Chair, yes.
Mr. Woodry. So we'll ask for suspension on 14319. And moving on, we had a walk-in piece that is somewhere in my stack of stuff. Is resolution 14419, which is a resolution to appropriate from the 322 Fire Impact Fund. And again, that's coming through safety. Mr. Director Hall.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to pass this back to Chief Wood.
Yes, we have a leak in between the first and second floors at Engine House 3. At first, we thought it was a roof leak, but we had Able Roofing come in, and they said it's not a roof leak, so we climbed up in there and looked. It's metal decking with concrete over top of the metal decking, and my guess is that they have the galvanized piping, water lines buried within that concrete. So it's going to cost, and it's a guess until we get in there, to have a plumber come in and demo the two showers, take out the tile, take out the block, get into the concrete. I don't know if we have some metal or some asbestos wrapped pipes as well. When I asked the gentleman how much he thought it would cost, I said, give me a ballpark. Is it 5? He goes, no, not even close. He said maybe 15 to 18, so I'm asking for 20, but you know, it could be less than that, it could be more than that, but I asked for 20, and we'll go from there. It's got to be fixed.
Yeah, we don't want to let those things go, and this is an approved use of the fire impact fee, and we are pretty healthy in that account, as most of you already know. It's a logical way to use this. So we're suspending on this again tonight as
We
well,
are,
right?
yes.
Okay.
One reading, please.
Okay, so we will suspend on that. Any questions on that? Very good. Mr. Woodyard, you the second on that as well, please?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So we will suspend on 144-19. The next items I have are all the city pay ordinances, which are ordinances 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. We'll just walk through those. Mayor Scheffler and Service Safety Director Martin, I don't think you have any additional positions in here, do you, other than the part-time tax clerk?
Yeah, the part-time tax person actually replaces a contracted person during busy season with a part-time employee for the entire year. So the way with some restructuring the income tax department, it made more sense, and the funds are about the same.
And then the other adds are the non-union, non-management for public transit, and then there's also an assistant transit director.
Right.
So those are the real changes to positions.
Right.
Not a typical year where we have a few, have changes in job grades and those types of things. So 26 is for the court. Clerk of courts has their own IT administrator. That's that's ordinance 2619. Are there any questions on that one? Mr. McDaniel, will you second that, please?
Yes.
So we'll ask for 2 readings on that one. 2719, that is the, again, that is the public transit, non-union, non-management pay ordinance and pay grade structure for public transit. Again, we will go 2 readings, and that'll be Mrs. Downhour for that one. If you have a question, just let me know. Holler at me, throw something. 28 is the non-union, non-management for all other city positions, and again, the changes in there are the part-time tax clerk replacing a contracted position, and then the transit, looks like we had some mechanic stuff in there that we moved out into the transit budget. That will be 2 readings as well, and that'll be Mr. McDaniel again. 29 is the management professional for the city. I think the change there in yellow is having an assistant executive director a part-time executive director to shadow for a period of time as Mary Jo transits out of the CDBG role, and then the addition on page 2 of the transit assistant director. Go 2 readings on that, and Mrs. Downhour, you will second that, please.
Mr. Stoker,
Yes.
where's the funds for the assistant director in transit coming from? The transit director, we donate that from the general fund, I understand.
We don't really donate, but we appropriate it.
Appropriate. So where's the money for the assistant director come from?
Again, we haven't increased our allowance, so we're $73,000 from the general fund.
Correct. So that is part, we've always had an assistant transit director, but they were paid through the ride-right contract.
Okay.
So it will just drop into the city budget, into the transit budget,
But it'll come
And-
out of the
transit revenue.
transit revenue, okay.
Yes.
So everything, only question I had.
Thank you. Further questions? All right, and then ordinance 30 is the elected officials ordinance. For the 4-year positions, we have to go out 4 years. Years 1 and 2 are zeros, and I believe years 3 and 4 are planned at 2. We're hopeful by that point in time, we will have passed a tax increase to fund city operations. Ironically, for those that haven't been on council for very long, it seems that the auditor and the treasurer and the law director, never, they don't have a straight line of increases. They have zeros and jagged, big raises. Then they go back to zeros for a period of time. Anytime there's issues with the budget, they tend to get zeros. So from a perspective that they are actually fulfilling their career and providing for their families, it's got to be disconcerting at some point in time. But at this point, we don't have the budget. I think the plan is zeros where they can be zeros this year, and this is part of it. So yes, Mrs. Teener.
Sorry, I want to go back. I want to say sorry.
It's okay.
On the permanent part-time income tax, I know they always have that, we talked about during the busy tax season. Is it a good idea right now with the income tax levy having passed to hire somebody? I mean, should we wait maybe to?
Well, as I said, they've always had this temporary person during busy season from
Right.
January through April. This is just replacing that temporary person with a permanent but part-time individual with the same funds that we were using for the temporary individual.
But they're not like seasonal.
This one would not be seasonal. It would be a part-time clerical
So that
person.
is different.
Pardon me?
That is different.
Yes. Well, it's doing the same function.
I know it's the same function, but it's a permanent position.
It is a permanent position, a permanent part-time position, correct.
I mean, maybe if you put together how many hours a week,
I don't know that off the top of my head.
that might help get some clarity to that if we had an idea, so you can get that
Okay.
information. Yes, Mr. Groff?
If I'm understanding that correctly, for Ms. Teener's question, this person worked seasonal, which was how many months out of the year?
I believe 4 months from
4 months out of the
basically
year?
the tax filing season from January to April.
And this is taking it to 12 months a year?
Yes, only part-time.
I think what he's saying is the 4 months were like permanent. They were there,
They were there.
they were
yes.
8-hour days. Now they're spreading out the work over 12.
Right.
Yes.
So that's why a comparison of hours would be helpful.
Yeah, there's going to be the same amount of hours. That's the interesting, is that's,
I believe that's correct, yes.
Were they part-time during that 4 months, or were they full-time during that 4 months?
They were a contract service. They weren't a partner,
To a temporary agency.
But full-time hours during that
Yeah.
4 months.
Okay,
but they were not,
that's all I want
yeah,
clarification.
not city employees.
question down then.
Just,
So before though, as part-time in those hours, as seasonal, we did not pay any benefits. But as part-time, full year round, will they be eligible for benefits then? And will that be an additional cost to us?
Well, I don't know, that's the administration.
Yeah, they would be entitled to PERS, but not to group insurance, health insurance, or any of those things.
Okay.
So, but that's all calculated into the cost.
Just that.
Seems to me the
Make
core
sure.
issue here is whether it's cost neutral, and it sounds like the mayor
Right.
is sort of saying that it is. And there's also obviously expense associated with using a temp agency that probably more than covers what we would expend in PERS. So it's a
Because
better
obviously,
deal.
with a temp agency, you're paying more than their hourly rate.
Yeah.
And they're paying the social security and all the benefits that are normally provided,
Okay,
payroll taxes.
okay.
All right, very good.
just, Tom,
Hey, Melody, you snuck in on us.
I snuck in. I just want to make certain that you put all that in what you give us. So, like Orman has just said, it looks like it might be the same. Put on there the wage that you pay the temporary service
Okay.
and how many hours, and that way we can look and see that it is the same then. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? That was back on 28, 29, we didn't have any questions at the time. And 30 is the pay ordinance with the clerk and the council not changing, and then the mayor and the auditor and the law director not changing for the first 2 years. I believe they're 2% in 3 and 4. Yes?
Just to remind everybody that the non-union management ordinances are with a 0% pay increase. I don't know if that was brought up in your discussion.
I did not, thank you for, I meant to, but I forgot, thank you.
Right, I think that's important for everybody to know.
It is important.
Yeah. We do have some increases for our bargaining units, but it's limited to those.
Okay. All right, and Mr. McDaniel, if you'll second 30, please. Appreciate that. Yes.
So, just for the general public, if they haven't seen this, so for 3019, so for 2020 and 2021, the mayor's salary will be $97,161.13, and then in 2022, $99,104.35, and then 2023, $101,086.43. That's a lot. I understand, but I didn't know with it being a new swearing in, if we can even reduce salaries of, some, elected officials, since it will be a new swearing in period at the end of time. I just think, and this is what I've heard a lot of why people voted the levy down, which it did go down a lot by very few people voting, was some of the salaries people are making, and that was one reason why it didn't pass. That's just one of the reasons. So, I mean, we're gonna bring it back out to the public again to pass this, and I'm not sure that, maybe even some salaries that can be lowered, maybe you should think about that.
Well, I would tell you, the mayor is not the highest paid person in the city.
I know that,
Well,
but I'm
but-
just trying to, as an example.
Well, that's fine, and I'm happy to have a robust discussion on any position in the city. But, these are professional people with,
I understand that.
well,
But
well,
I'm
it
just
cuts-
saying
well-
that's, if you want a levy to pass, that might be something you might consider some of the salaries. Mr. Groff did a survey, he went out to cities, and he did get really good data on like cities, like ours. So I'm just putting that out there for possibly because if you want the income tax levy to pass in March, sometimes you need to cut from, we need to cut. I know we've frozen some salaries, obviously, but, I've heard from the public, and obviously they voted. So, and there's a lot of other things, other issues as to why it went down, but salaries is one of the reasons. So I'm just putting that out there.
sure, but, I'm gonna give you the counterpoint to your point. That cuts both ways. I can go out to the same salary survey and find folks that are paying more than us. So it's, it's all in how you frame the discussion that you want to have. At the end of the day, could we, I believe 2 or 4 years ago when we had the 18-year-old running who said that, such and such needed to make $50,000 and someone needed to make $60,000. And no one gave that a lot of credence, because for what you get for, a municipal gas superintendent, for $60,000, you run an awful lot of risk that goes along with running these
Well, I'm
departments.
just putting it out there
Sure.
because
It's
for
fair.
a small voter turnout, it failed pretty big.
Yeah, well, so, and again, part of what has to happen is we have to be transparent and ensure folks that the way we're spending the city's money is in the best interest of this city. Further comments? All right, so again, Don, you'll be.
I'm late. I'm late on my question. Sorry.
Is the cough medicine kicking
It's
in
the
down
cough-
there?
It's the cough medicine.
All right, Melody,
And-
Mrs. Bobbin.
And we do 4 years for the mayor and 4 years for the auditor, because they're elected for 4 years.
Yes.
And, okay, sorry, and the Randall. Okay, just wanted to make certain.
Yep, you got it.
Further
All right.
question.
Sure.
Say, in a bad scenario, that we're in the same situation next December? Are we locked into those salaries that we're approving for the next 4 years?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if statutorily there's anything we can do, but that's a Randall question. That's not a Tom Stoughton
You know,
question.
just, that's something to think about. And
Sure.
Yeah, so the Ohio Constitution basically sets forth that elected officials cannot have a pay increase in their term. So anything that's set prior to the start of a new term, 4-year term, that sets it for the 4 years.
pay increase, but what about a pay decrease?
Pay decrease? Oh,
Say we-
any change in pay over the 4-year.
So we'd be smarter.
You can't have interim increases, in
Okay.
essence, is what you can't have. Except
If it
judges.
wouldn't pass, we're going to be locked into these pay raises.
I'm sorry?
If the levy wouldn't pass, we're going to be locked into these
That's-
raises.
Whatever legislation, yes, is passed with regard to the 4-year term that's correct. It's for the term.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? All right, very good. That's, I think that's all the legislation I have. Are there any departmental updates this evening?
I'd like to update council a little bit on our new truck. The chassis made it to the factory. You'll recall we ordered a truck about a year ago. So, excuse me. So it should be done about February. Our 1994 mini tower, the engine blew back in the spring. We were hoping to find somebody that would be interested in buying that at a fair price. We couldn't find any takers, so we placed it on Gov Deals. I just spoke with the assistant chief. Right now, the bid's at like $1,500. We had a minimum bid of $5,000. It's not going to probably, it may reach that, I don't know, but if not, then we'll have to relist it and lower the minimum bid on that. So that's the mini tower. On a good note, Captain Maffin, our EMS captain, had secured a grant from Fairfield Medical Foundation for $5,000 to upgrade our modems for our LifePak 15s, which is our EKG machines. So that's something that, obviously we don't have a lot of money for, and we're able to get that from Fairfield Medical Foundation. And then kudos to Captain Schultz. He went out, and thank you to everybody that voted for us. We secured that Columbia Gas grant. So I'm going to touch base with the captains and see what our needs are, and then we'll let you know what we're going to purchase with that. So thank you to Columbia Gas and all the citizens that voted for us.
Tell me again about the grant you got from FMC.
It's for modems, LifePak 15 modems, so we can communicate to the hospital, transmit.
Gotcha. Thank you. Further updates?
I just wanted to say thank you publicly to the Fairfield County Board of DD. In case you missed the press release, Fairfield County Board of DD donated 2 vehicles to the city and to public transit to use to transport individuals that specifically have a disability. So they both had wheelchair lifts in them, and it's a great donation for us to receive. And then I also wanted to say thank you to the X-Church, as I've come before you a few times this year. Steve Rao has contacted me yet once again, asking to pay fares for our loop bus. This time it's going to be the first Saturday of December. If you all recall, we started a new service at the beginning of 2019 where we do one loop the first Saturday of each month. And Steve Rao has asked to pay the fares for anybody wanting to ride that loop the first Saturday in December. So again, thanks to him. That has been such a great partnership for us, and it allows anyone to ride our bus at zero cost. So we get a lot of homeless people going to find food and shelter, warming stations. So that's been a great partnership as well, and so a huge thanks to both of them.
Very good. Questions for? No questions. Thank you. Further updates?
I have one.
Yes.
I just
Mr.
want to
Ellis.
let everyone know that we were successful in securing a VAWA grant again this year to help fund our domestic violence prosecutor, so very thankful for that.
And I have one.
Thank you, sir. Sorry? I'm still writing.
Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. Fire away.
So I wanted to talk about NOPEC and our electricity aggregation opportunity this year. So, is there a time limit on this, Mr. Stoughton?
You're already past time.
I'm already past time. So, many years ago, the Ohio legislature passed electric or utility deregulation in the state of Ohio, and, but saw that it was very difficult for individual property owners or residents to take advantage of that because it's a fairly complicated process. So they also passed an aggregation law that allowed municipalities to, through the vote of the residents, to aggregate electric and gas, both. And the Lancaster voters passed electric aggregation about 15 years ago. I'm not sure the exact year. It's kind of before my time, but about 15 years ago. For the last 6 years, we have used First Energy, and we're required every 3 years to go out and find the provider with the lowest rates or the best deal for the residents. So this is the year that we were required to do that again. We became aware of NOPEC sometime probably about a year ago, and NOPEC is the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council. It's called Northeast Ohio because that's where it started. It is actually a not-for-profit corporation set up precisely to take advantage of utility aggregation. The board of directors is made up of mayors, county commissioners, township trustees, and a few other elected officials. I think there was a county engineer, as I recall. And these folks are elected from the 235 municipalities that are members of NOPEC. The closest one to us that's a board member is Steve Patterson, the mayor of Athens, is a board member. So what happens at the end of 3 years, and this happens even if we stayed with First Energy like we did 3 years ago, they're required to send out a letter offering services to the residents. We have about 16,000 residences in Lancaster, and not all of them received the letter. And I've gotten some communications about we didn't receive a letter. I personally did not receive a letter, strangely enough, and I investigated and found out why. If you have affirmatively elected to receive your power from some provider, you would not get a NOPEC letter. 6,000 letters went out to Lancaster residents, and those were the people that were on the First Energy aggregation program. So if you sometime in the past elected somebody other than AEP Energy to provide your power, then you did not get a letter. You can affirmatively go subscribe to NOPEC by, first of all, finding out what your deal is with your current power provider, because a lot of them have fixed-term contracts, like 6 months, a year, 3 years, and typically there's some penalty to get out of those contracts. So if you did not get a letter, you probably have some other provider of power. You can determine that by looking at your AEP Ohio utility bill. It lists who the power provider is. If you got a letter and you're not interested in using NOPEC, then you have to notify them either by sending back the card or the paper that you got with the letter, or you can call the number on the letter to opt out. It is true that the first rate they're giving us is for 4 months, January through April. It's called their standard program rate. It changes every 4 months. That's one of the options you have with NOPEC. You can also elect a variable rate, which is the lowest rate that they offer. Just like if you get a mortgage on your house, the variable rate mortgages are lower than the fixed rate mortgages. So they have the standard program rate, which is 4 months at a time, the variable rate, which changes every month, and they have 2 fixed rate programs, a 24-month and a 12-month. So that's where we are. This all takes effect January 1st. This is a very impressive organization. Mr. Martin and Mr. Olam and I attended their annual meeting up in Twinsburg, Ohio, a couple of weeks ago. met all the members of their board of directors. As I said, are mayors, county commissioners, and other elected officials that are elected from the 235 municipalities that are members and participate with NOPEC. Randall, did-
Small businesses.
Yes, residents and small businesses are eligible for this, so you don't have to be a homeowner. You can have a small business and take advantage of the NOPEC aggregation. One of the advantages of NOPEC is that the city doesn't have to go out and go through the whole process of getting bids from utility generators, from electric generators every 3 years. NOPEC actually performs that function for all the member municipalities. And by the way, AEP Ohio does not generate power. The power that comes to your home is not produced by AEP Ohio. AEP Ohio is a service organization that maintains poles, wires, your service, sends you your bill. They do all the things. They're a service provider. The power is generated that comes to your house from some other entity, whether it's AEP Energy, NOPEC, First Energy, or any of the dozens of other power providers that are out there. If you want to see all of them, you can go to energychoice.ohio.gov, and there is a long list of power generators on there from prices all over the board. Very expensive power, and obviously there are some people in Ohio that subscribe to very expensive power for one reason or another. So, any questions?
Have you been getting phone calls?
Pardon me?
Have you been getting phone calls from people not understanding the letter?
Yes.
So
And-
thank you for explaining.
Yes, we get phone calls, especially the administrative staff get a lot of phone calls. There have been people stopped in. I've talked to some of them, but basically the administrative staff handle those. There's also a lot of Facebook chatter out there, especially about the opt-out issue, and that's not a City of Lancaster deal. That's not an OPEC deal. That's established by the Ohio Revised Code. So, as I said, taking advantage of deregulation is a very complicated process, and the opt-out is an attempt to make it as easy as possible to take advantage of deregulation.
All right, questions for the mayor? I have a question. Should everyone have received a letter by now?
Everybody that's going to receive a letter, unless it's lost in the mail, has received a letter. Of the 16,000 Lancaster residences, about 6,000 letters went out, because that's the number of people that were utilizing the First Energy aggregation program in the past.
Because I just checked, I didn't get one, but I am a First Energy.
So you may have done something to, rather than just participate in the aggregation program, you somehow elected First Energy affirmatively. That's what I've been told.
Okay, so I reach out to NOPEC now, or?
You can reach out to NOPEC,
Okay.
right. And you might want to check the requirements to get out of your First Energy contract if you have a separate First Energy contract.
Okay.
There may be a penalty to get out.
I think I have the same problem.
Yeah, I have the same, I haven't gotten one either.
Or maybe they did something wrong. I mean, come on, we'll figure it out. So, no, I just wanted to ask. I heard, I was checking while you were talking
Okay,
about
well,
it.
we were aware that there are about 6,000 participants in the First Energy aggregation program, and I've been told by NOPEC that they've sent out 6,000 letters.
Okay.
So you could be a First Energy subscriber without participating in the city aggregation program.
Okay. Because my rate is like .546. Does that sound about? Anyway, we're not going to solve that here. I'll fend for myself, and I'll share with you folks what I learned. Okay, any other departmental updates? Yes.
Mine's just quick. I apologize, I was going to have a 2019 budget year-end cleanup piece to you tonight, but I'm working with a few departments because of their revenue stream and making sure they bring it in, so I don't lower budget that they need. So I will have legislation into you guys on the next meeting, but I'll try to get it sent to you before, so just in case you guys have any questions.
Okay. And that's an annual activity.
Yes.
All right, further departmental updates. Seeing none, I'll defer to President Uhl for tonight's meeting prep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have just a couple of things specifically pertaining to tabled legislation. Temporary Ordinance 11-19 will need to be taken from the table and withdrawn. Ms. Downhour, you're prepared to do that for us this evening? Excellent. And then Temporary Ordinance 20-19 needs to be taken from the table, amended and replaced, and then placed back on the table. Mr. Groff, you're prepared to do that this evening? Very good. Other than that, I have no other prep for this evening.
All right. Any other items for finance? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
And we are adjourned.
It is 6:42. The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:50.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio, and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS, and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Almost everyone needs a car to get from point A to point B, and many families have 2 or more cars. At Carriage Company, located at 1031 North Memorial Drive in Lancaster, we specialize in hard-to-find used cars. Due to the recent success of the new car market, there is a large inventory of used cars available for resale. We can help you find exactly what you're looking for. With over 15 years at this location and 27 years experience in the business, we are the best place to go to find your next car, truck, van, or SUV. As a member of the Better Business Bureau, we are a Carfax Advantage dealer and offer great financing rates through a local area bank, with warranties available on most vehicles. We know your time is valuable, so we take special pride in making sure that you get what you came for at a price that you can afford.
Come into the Carriage Company and check out our sweet deals.
Stop by today and let us help you, or visit us online at carriagecompany.com.
Sweet!
which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please make sure all of your microphones are switched to on. Please call the.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Here.
Mrs. Downhour? Here. Mr. Groff?
Here. He's here.
Mr. Hall?
He was thinking.
Here.
Mr. McDaniel?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Mr. Stoughton?
Here.
Mrs. Teener? Here. Mr. Woodard?
Here.
Let the record reflect that all 9 members of Lancaster City Council are in attendance tonight. Reading and disposing of the journal.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated November 4th, 2019.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Reports of city officials.
Series of emails dated November 6, 2019 regarding upcoming certified public records training for 2020 submitted by Mrs. Downhour. Email dated November 13, 2019 regarding safety committee meeting submitted by Mr. Richard. Email dated November 13, 2019 regarding safety committee meeting submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Letter dated November 15, 2019 regarding timber top property change of zoning request submitted by city engineer Mitch Nolan. Email dated November 15, 2019 regarding timber top property change of zoning submitted by stormwater engineer Stephen Wellstead. Email dated November 20th, 2019 regarding special presentation submitted by Mrs. Teener. Email dated November 22nd, 2019 regarding 2020 budget status submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. And finally, an email dated November 25th, 2019 regarding temporary resolution 143-19 submitted by Chief David Ward.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of city officials. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are 3. Letter dated November 6, 2019 regarding Westport Homes submitted by a concerned Lancaster citizen. Letter dated November 12, 2019 regarding notice to the legislative authority of the annual objection to renewal of all City of Lancaster liquor permits submitted by the Ohio Department of Liquor Control. And finally, an email dated November 20, 2019 regarding timber top public hearing submitted by Christine Collins, Director of Development, Fairfield Homes.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. On the agenda tonight, we did have a special presentation. However, as we had discussions with this individual, we realized that his presentation was going to take much longer than we had initially anticipated. It was regarding the upcoming census. We'll have more of an update on the action that this body needs to take in new business. And so until then, though, there are no special presentations or awards tonight. Are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
During this time of our meeting, Lancaster City Council sets time aside to hear from the voters and taxpayers of the city. If you'd like to address Lancaster City Council tonight, please come forward. Sign in with your name and address at the podium, and then state the same for the record. Please note that during this time, City Council members will not respond to you, but they may choose to do so at a later time during the meeting. In accordance with the rules of City Council, we ask that you would keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my name is Marcia Conrad. I live at 1005 Zimmer Street. I'm here because of what just happened a little bit ago in regards to the NOPEC. I also did not receive a letter. I know that I stayed with the city on this. I worked with the city during the time when this all first started. I know I do not know enough to opt out to go to somebody else and initiate, and I think there's a lot of people in town who would be the same as me. I cannot believe that I don't know how many households we have in Lancaster. Certainly we have a whole lot more than 6,000. I don't know what's going on with it or what, but I don't even know how to spell NOPEC, let alone who to call, because I didn't get a letter with a number. So I don't know anything. So I do hope that whatever you do, you make sure that it hits the front page of the paper with what we're supposed to do, who to call, how to do it, and like you said, something about a penalty, what it involves, because I know nothing about how to make this change. or to even make this decision. That's why I left it up to the city when they did it. Y'all are much smarter than I am and know more about this type of thing. So hopefully it does make the paper and the front page, and you see to it and make sure that people understand, because I just can't believe that there's only 6,000 people I know did not get a letter, and I am with First Energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Conrad. We did have a discussion in between, and today during old business, the mayor will give the same presentation he gave during the Finance Committee meeting. And so for those that have questions, if you want to hang around to old business, we'll be addressing this at that point. Is there anyone else who would like to address Lancaster City Council tonight? Well, thank all of you for being here. Are there reports of standing committees?
There is one Finance Committee meeting minutes for November 25th, 2019, submitted by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second. I have a motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move directly to the reading of resolutions, beginning with the third reading of temporary resolution 133-19.
A resolution to create a new fund for hotel motel tax 855 and to set up revenue and expense accounts, offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. Stoughton.
Well, let me get there. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record resolution temporary 133-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 133-19. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The auditor would like to set up new funds for the hotel motel tax with revenue and expense accounts, so the money can be better tracked and be really more transparent to what it is. So she's asking us to set these up.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 133-19 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 134-19.
A resolution to create a new fund for BWC processing 850 and to set up revenue and expense accounts, offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record resolution temporary 134-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 134-19. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Again, same as the prior resolution. The way the Bureau of Workmen's Comp processes or requires us to process our payments and expenses and revenues to them requires the auditor to now set this up as a, again, more granular tracking process. So we're creating these revenue and expense accounts for the BWC payments and revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Stoughton. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 134-19 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 135-19.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering contract, offered by Mr. Woodard, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Woodard.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 135-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 135-19. Discussion, Mr. Woodard.
Well, this is to provide $70,000 in order to take care of the needed to provide adequate construction, inspection, and other services on capital projects and supplemental staff inspections on private property.
Thank you, Mr. Woodard. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 135 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 136-19.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for inspection services, offered by Mr. Woodard, second by Mr. Hall.
Mr. Woodard.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 136-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 136-19. Discussion, Mr. Woodard.
And again, this is for inspection services on the 5th, 6th Forest Rose project. This will be a $140,000 project and one that we're moving forward on.
Further discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 136-19 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 139-19.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the Stormwater Sewer Fund 606 and amend the certificate with the county auditor for a grant to Fairfield County for the Hunters Run Conservancy District, offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Resolution Temporary 139-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record Temporary Resolution 139-19. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So we've had the president of the Conservancy District Board here, which is Lindy Jackson, who is here again this evening, that he did, really discussed really the district and the need for the repairs and how he and others who took on the new board positions discovered, really unmaintained dams in the district that needed to be repaired, and with that comes a price. He had asked the city and the county to participate, or the board asked the city and the county, as well as I believe Judge Trimmer, to participate or find funding revenue to basically fund these repairs that need to be done to basically bring some of the glaring maintenance issues up to speed to really protect a bigger part of Lancaster. And I'm going to defer to the mayor or the service agency director that can really talk about the area of Lancaster that will benefit from obviously all the work that's happened to date.
Sure. As we learned from Mr. Jackson, that there are a series of dams surrounding the north and west sides of Lancaster that actually offer flood control for basically the Hocking River watershed, the lowest area of the cities, including the near west side and all along the Hocking River, are very susceptible to flooding, and these dams help to mitigate that by holding back water during a heavy rain event. The Hunters Run Conservancy District discovered that over a number of years the dams had not been maintained, and there were actually some crisis situations, including I know that we dispatched a vac truck to take care of a particular sticky situation at one of the dams. Also, in the last couple of weeks, the Columbus Dispatch has had a front page article about high hazard dams specifically in central Ohio, and two of those dams are Hunters Run Conservancy dams, which I think they're classified as high hazard dams. So we were asked to participate in the amount of $30,000 to help alleviate this situation, and the county participated in the amount of $36,000. We considered it, I don't know if emergency is the right term, but high priority to get these repairs done as quickly as possible. So we authorized to go ahead to commit $30,000 to that. We have actually not paid that $30,000. The county funded or advanced our $30,000 with the belief that they would receive it back whenever it was passed by council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you have further discussion, Mr. Stone?
No, other than the fact that I believe that we were told again by Mr. Jackson that with the board and the judge, they're trying to find a different revenue stream so they can continue the maintenance operations. It's not a one and done. It's a continual process that needs to be funded.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Mr. Woodard.
Well, I think you all realize I have a problem with this one, and I guess my concern is not necessary for the need. I think this is something had it been handled correctly, all of us would have found some way to handle this. My concern is that originally this was not asked for as a grant. It was asked for as a loan originally, I believe, in the neighborhood of $50,000. Somewhere along the line, the administration decided to change that to a grant. I have a problem with giving ratepayer money for a grant for someone outside the city to operate. I think this is money that is supposed to be provided for our separation of storm and sewer projects in the city, so that when there is a high water issue, that the backups that may or may not occur in basements is only water and not human excrements. So this bothers me that we didn't look at this. It should have come through water pollution because it's water pollution money. I also have a problem with the fact that it was agreed to in June and that the administration did not see, although they caused an emergency. Well, to me, an emergency then would have been say, yes, we really see this as a need, but we will go to council immediately and try to get the money right away. And I think council would have responded. But to wait until October to come to council, in fact, we even had Mr. Jackson here in September to tell us about the problems, yet nothing was mentioned about the fact that we owed money. And so I have a real problem with the way this was handled from start to finish. And that's all I'll say the rest of the night on it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Woodger, is there further discussion on the motion to pass? Ms. Teener?
I agree with Mr. Woodard. I made my statement last time. And of course, there was the amendment to it that it was in October, that it was over around the Amanda Northern Road areas, which, and I understand, I read the article from the Dispatch, I understand that, but I think Bloom Township should have been asked for money, and I'd asked, and they hadn't been asked. I don't know why Greenfield Township hadn't been asked. We shouldn't have had to foot the full amount, so I agree with Mr. Woodger.
Thank you, Ms. Teener. Further discussion on the motion to pass? Mr. Hall?
Just a quick word. I agree with Mr. Woodger about his procedural concerns. I think they appear to be valid, but it would also seem to me that this particular project has significant public value for the citizens of Lancaster, and I support it.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Further discussion? Anyone else before we go to the mayor? Mr. Mayor?
I might have one point of clarification. I believe Mr. Woodgard said this was coming from water pollution control funds. It's coming from stormwater funds. The stormwater budget is an enterprise department. Its budget is $3.5 million. For 2019, this is $30,000.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further discussion on the motion to pass? Mr. McDaniel?
I would just, I understand Mr. Woodard's objections. We've spoke about it at length. As Mr. Hall stated, these dams directly impact our citizens. And to answer Ms. Teener's questions, if I could, I think the county's participation included township funding. And that's the way I understood it, and I would support this.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Further discussion? Ms. Bobbitt?
I have to get my 2 cents in, too. So, I think at our last meeting, you did apologize that it was not handled the way it should have, because any money should come through city council. I do support this. We need it. And like Dawn said, the Greenfield, that's coming through the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bobbitt. Further discussion? Last call. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
No.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
No.
Mr. Woodgard?
No.
Temporary Resolution 139-19 passes 6-3. We'll now move to the second reading of Temporary Resolution 1. We'll now move to the second reading of resolutions, beginning with Temporary Resolution 140-19.
A resolution to make appropriations for current 2020 budget expenses and other expenditures of the City of Lancaster, State of Ohio for the fiscal year 2020, and to establish line item transfer authority for departments, offered by Mr. Stoughton, seconded by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the budget piece. We do not have an amended budget to put in place of the original, but the administration has prepared documentation for police and fire and general fund that they have shared with City Council. If you have, or if anyone around council has questions, certainly please feel free to reach out to me or the administration to get more clarity. The only thing I would ask the administration to do, if you're ready to cut loose the other parts of the budget, we would like to see those as well when you have time. Now, When do you, well, I guess prior to the next meeting, which is the 16th, correct? Which is, what, 3 weeks?
Yes.
When do you anticipate us seeing kind of what the next cut?
I have no anticipated date at this point, as soon as possible. We still have a big gap to close, and we will get out information as it's available. Certainly, the enterprise funds and the special funds are all in sound financial shape. It's only the general fund. I can send those out at any time, and you all have had a copy of those. I don't anticipate any change in those going forward.
So let me ask you a question. So since we don't know, we haven't gotten the gap filled up, we're not sure what the carryover is going to be. A lot of questions to the budget. I mean, there's nothing wrong with passing a budget, knowing full well that if the carryover is more than what we expect it to be to support the budget we have, or less than, or equal to the expectation. There's nothing that says we can't pass something and then go into January knowing exactly what is and making that change then. Is that something that you would be willing to consider?
Sure. And this week is the end of the month, and we will have a much better idea about carryover and year-to-date expenditures after the end of this month. We can update all of that information. So we'll have a better basis to make some decisions going forward after Saturday, I think is the 30th. So
let me throw this out here. I mean, I know people love meetings as much as anything that they love to do, but I'm willing to hold a special finance committee meeting to have a discussion prior to the 16th if council feels that's something they would like to do. Once we start getting more budget information in there. So if you're interested in doing that, I'm happy to lead that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stoughton.
It's not my floor, actually.
That's all right. You can have it if you want.
I forgot we're not.
You can have it if you want. Yes, Ms. Teener.
So, and this is just, let's see, this is my third term. So haven't we always had the budget before now? I mean, at least to look at things. I mean, more than what we have. I mean. You're
asking me. Oh, well, yes, you normally do. You have the general fund.
The general fund. This is the end of the month, and it's kind of like, oh, is this going to be given to us the weekend before?
No, you have the general fund budget. You got that.
Well, but I mean, it's just kind of like I'd like to compare it to last year's and sit down and look at it and everything.
What does that?
You have that. You had that before the last meeting. It was introduced as the original budget, so you can see last year's numbers.
You're talking about getting things to us and that, whatever you're.
Right, and you have gotten several emails from me this week with additional information and additional schedules, including the general fund. Just as a way of review, there are actually 3 different kinds of funds in the city. One is the enterprise funds, which is gas, water, water pollution control, sanitation, and stormwater. And utilities collection is kind of a semi-enterprise funds. They are self-funded and self-maintaining. They're like little companies within the city. The city, from general funds, cannot give any money to them. They cannot give any money to us. They have to make sure that their revenues are sufficient to cover their expenses for the year. The money is locked up in there. And the other kind of funds, special funds, are like the street department. Their revenue comes from gasoline taxes and license plate fees. The general fund only provides a small amount of money to them, $150,000, which covers functions that they perform for the city that aren't related to streets, like mosquito spraying, closing the streets for parades and those kinds of things that they have to incur overtime for. So we do not give any money. There is no city income tax money used for streets, not to pave, not to fill potholes, plow snow, mow grass, any of those things. That's a special fund. The Parks Department is a special fund. The rest is the general fund, which includes police and fire. Our city income tax collections are estimated to be a little over $20 million this year. The police and fire expenses are about $19 million. So they have gone up. We have 4 unions that represent police and fire. We have contracted increases that we cannot violate unless we break the contract, which would not be fun or cheap. So police and fire expenses continue to go up every year. The rest of the general fund departments, which are basically those that are housed in City Hall and the annex buildings, such as code enforcement, engineering, the building department, the Service Safety Director's office, the mayor's office, and the other departments that most citizens would consider to be the government. The expenses other than police and fire have been very flat over the years. Services have been cut, staff has been cut, expenses have been minimized, and so as expenses have continued to go up, the revenue has not gone up as fast. So this year, we started out estimated income of $19.4 million in the general fund and estimated expenses of $22 million. So somehow that gap has to be closed, and that's what we're working on. We didn't have that gap in the past, and that's why the budget may have seemed easier in the past than it has this year. But we have a problem, and we have to fix it.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Mr.
I may
Snowden?
have misspoken. We have gotten the full budget. That, I was referring to attaching the current general fund to the rest of the budget. So we actually have
You actually have the full budget.
We do have the full budget. I believe I did not, I believe I implied that we didn't get that original, and that's my apologies. I want to get some clarity to that.
Thank you, Mr. Snowden. Further discussion on temporary resolution 140-19 before we toss it back to Mr. Stoughton. Mr. Stoughton?
Second reading, please.
Second reading then on temporary resolution 140-19, and if anyone's interested in that meeting, we can work through that via email or contact Mr. Stoughton to get that set up. Very good. We'll now move to the first reading of a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 141-19.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Fairfield County Health District, Fairfield County General Health District for public health services, offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporary 141-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 141-19. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We passed a 2-year agreement with the General Health District at their request, but yet we went back and gave them the authorization, and they didn't want to actually have a 2-year agreement. So we are now amending this to a 1-year agreement, and we're going to pass that, and the negotiation will begin at some time for that second year by the end of next year. So we just want to make sure we have this in place, asking for suspension tonight because we will have plenty to do in 3 weeks when we meet again.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record resolution temporary 141-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 141-19. Mr. Stoughton. Further discussion?
No, sir.
Any other discussion or discussion at all on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
And Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 141-19 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 142-19.
A resolution declaring the necessity of an election on the question of approving the passage of an ordinance to amend section 183.012, 183.013, and 183.002 of the codified ordinances of the city of Lancaster, Ohio, in order to increase the city income tax rate by 0.45% from the current rate of 1.75%, 1.75%, to a rate of 2.20%, 2.20%, beginning January 1st, 2021, and to specify the allocation of funds from such tax and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the putting back on the ballot the income tax that failed on the November ballot. Just a couple points of order here. needs to have, or we need to have this to the County Board of Elections by the 18th of December. We only have one more meeting, so in the event that we want to have 3 full meetings, I've asked Mrs. Downhour and Mr. McDaniel to join me in calling a special meeting, if needed, on December the 17th. The specific agenda for that will be everything budget-related and income tax-related, and then anything that we address before then can be struck from that agenda at the start of that meeting. So that way we've got an opportunity to have that 3rd meeting should we need it. But tonight, that's the first of 3 readings, or 2 readings, 2 planned readings.
First of 2 planned readings on temporary resolution 142-19. Temporary resolution 143-19.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and amend the certificate with the county auditor in Fund 247, offered by Mr. Hall, second by Mr. Woodard.
Mr. Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the 2nd and 3rd reading of resolution temporarily numbered 143-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the 2nd and 3rd reading of temporary resolution 143-19. Discussion, Mr. Hall.
I'm going to punt some of this discussion to Chief Ward, but in summary, we have 2 line items, medical supplies and contract services, that are under where they need to be. Largely, these line items are largely predicated on gross receipts. So we do need to appropriate funds to cover the balance. So Chief Ward's going to give a little more detail, and then I'm going to ask him to stay for another motion.
Chief.
Yes, the medical supplies, like we said, as runs go up, we use more supplies, IV drips, angiocasts, whatever it might be. So initially, last year, we switched vendors, and we were hoping to see some kind of a savings there. I think with the increased usage, the savings didn't materialize as we thought. We did budget lean, and so here we are a little bit short for this year. That's on the medical supplies. And then on the contractual fees, or the EMS billing, as you bill more, your fees go up. And so this is the first year that we've ever had to pay the fees. All the fees before were paid by Auditor Nettles out of the general fund. So this is something that we weren't accustomed to. We knew it was going to be tight. When we bill more, we get more fees, but it goes to the general fund, so it's just cost of doing business.
Thank you, Chief Ward. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Mr. Hall, you have anything else before we call the roll?
Not at this time.
Please call the roll on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Mr. Hall.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 143-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 143-19. Further discussion, Mr. Hall?
Not at this time.
Other discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 143-19 passes 9-0. We now have walk-in legislation, temporary resolution 144-19.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance, amend the certificate with the county auditor and the Fire Impact Fund 322, and approve a then and now certificate. I'll get through this. Offered by Mr. Hall, second by Mr. Woodard.
Mr. Hall.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the 2nd and 3rd reading of resolution temporarily numbered 144-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the 2nd and 3rd reading of temporary resolution 144-19. Discussion, Mr. Hall.
I'm going to defer to Chief Ward, please.
Chief.
Yes, this is a leak we have in Engine House 3 between the first floor and the second floor. It's plumbing. We first thought it was the roof, but Able Roofing came in and said it's not the roof. The plumbing is above the decking, I think inside the concrete, but it's going to take a lot of work to get to what we find out what's leaking. So when I talked to the plumber, I said, give me an idea, and knowing that you can't really give us a great estimate. And I said, would 5 cover it? And he goes, no. Try 15 to 18. It could be a little bit less, it could be a little bit more, but that's where we are. That engine house was built in 1966. It's all galvanized plumbing, and my guess is going forward, to that point, we're gonna have to look at some costs, some fixes to that engine house, but right now, we're looking at, this short-term fix for this leak, so. And I have about 16,000 left in building and grounds, and if it's 20, it's over budget. Plus, I'm gonna transfer some of, monies around to cover a few bills that are short, so there's just not enough money in the building and grounds.
Thank you, Chief. Discussion on the motion to suspend. Yes, Mr. Woodyard.
And we want to point out to council, we bring this to you at the last moment because at the Safety Committee meeting, it was brought to our attention by Chief Ward, and Mr. Stoughton pointed out that we could find the funds in the fire impact, and we felt it was something that needed to be done right away.
Good point.
Thank you, Mr. Woodyard. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer.
Yes.
Mr. Groff.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Mr. Woodyard.
Yes.
Motion to suspend carries 9-0. Mr. Hall.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 144-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 144-19. Further discussion, Mr. Hall?
Not at this time.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer.
Yes.
Mr. Groff.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Mr. Woodyard.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 144-19 passes 9-0. Are there any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? Seeing none, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with the third reading of temporary ordinance 21-19.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of a revenue note in the aggregate principal amount of $315,038.71 to reimburse Flagstar Bank FSB for a draw on a letter of credit in connection with cost of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Michaels Way by grading, widening, paving, and curbing, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities and installing sidewalk, traffic signals, and signs, and water, sanitary, and stormwater lines and facilities together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downauer.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary 2119.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 21-19. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This is the debt on the letter of credit for Island Capital. This is debt not being paid. This is debt being paid down by the developer, not by the city, but we have to run it through the city because of the TIF.
Thank you, Mr. Stoughton. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer.
Yes.
Mr. Groff.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
And Mr. Woodyard.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 21-19 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 22-19.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of a revenue notes in the aggregate principal amount of $1,015,677.54 to pay costs of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Michaels Way by grading, widening, paving, curbing, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities and installing sidewalks, traffic signals, and signs, and water, sanitary, and stormwater lines and facilities, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the developer note to the Island Capital letter of credit. So with that, I'm going to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary 2219.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 22-19. Further discussion, Mr. Stoughton?
No, thank you.
Other discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt.
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer.
Yes.
Mr. Groff.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Mr. Woodyard.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 22-19 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 23-19.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in a maximum principal amount of $1,260,000 in anticipation of issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of renovations of an existing building for use by the city's municipal court, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency, offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downauer.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary 2319.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 23-19. Discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was an overrun on the project of $1.8 million being paid for by the court. This is the note that shows the pay down and basically finances the debt for the remainder of the term, which I believe there's 1.2 million remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Stoughton. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Mr. Woodger.
Just that council wants to emphasize the fact that this is not money out of the general fund or anything. This is money that will come from the courts to pay this down.
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Woodger. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 23-19 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 25-19.
An ordinance to amend and replace Lancaster Codified Ordinance Part 1, Administrative Code, Title 9, Taxation, Chapter 183, Section 183.03, Definitions of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Lancaster, and to repeal existing Part 1, Administrative Code, Title 9, Taxation, Chapter 183, Section 183.03, Definitions, and declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downauer.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Ohio General Assembly enacted House Bill 166, which amended definitions in the Ohio Revised Code specific to pensions and retirement benefit plans. Therefore, we are required to change our code to match the past legislation, which is what this does. So with that, did I make the motion yet?
Not yet.
Jesus. Maybe I am getting sick.
Cold medicine?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not
No,
yet.
Maybe
got
it's
it?
your cough medicine.
I'd like to
Are
make a
you-
motion that
you,
council
Mrs.
pass and
Bobbitt?
gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporary 2519.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 25-19. Further discussion, Mr. Stoughton.
No, sir.
Any other discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 25-19 passes 9-0. We have no ordinances for second reading, so we'll move to the first reading of temporary ordinance 26-19.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for the Information Technology Administrator of the Clerk of Court employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio, commencing the first pay period of 2020, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the IT Administrator for the Clerk of Courts. This will be the first of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 26-19. Temporary ordinance 27-19.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for transit personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2020. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downauer.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the pay ordinance for transit non-union employees. This will be the first of two readings, please.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 27-19. Temporary ordinance 28-19.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for those employees who are not members of recognized bargaining units employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2020, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. These are the remaining non-union personnel pay ordinances, and this is the first of two readings, please.
First two readings on temporary ordinance 28-19. Temporary ordinance 29-19.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for management and professional personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2020, and to declare an emergency. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downauer.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the management professional pay ordinance. This is the first of two readings, please.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 29-19. Temporary ordinance 30-19.
An ordinance to establish the compensation for elected officials, including the mayor, auditor, council president, council members, council clerk, and to maintain a full-time law director for the term commencing payroll 1 of 2020. Offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's the pay ordinance for the elected officials, and this will be the first of two readings, please.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 30-19. Temporary ordinance 31-19.
An ordinance to amend section 183.12, 183.013, and 183.02 of the codified ordinances of the City of Lancaster, Ohio, in order to increase the city income tax rate by 0.45%, 0.45%, from the current rate of 1.75%, 1.75%, to a rate of 2.20%, 2.20%, beginning January 1st, 2021, and to specify the allocation of funds from such tax and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. Stoughton, second by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. Stoughton.
Thank you, Mr. President. We introduced resolution, I think, 14219 tonight, which is the resolution asking for a tax increase. This is the corresponding ordinance. Therefore, this will be the first of two readings on the ordinance.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 31-19. Are there further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? Seeing none, is there any action on tabled legislation?
Sure.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council remove from the table ordinance temporarily numbered 11-19 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove from the table temporary ordinance 11-19 star. Given that this is a privileged motion, there is no debate. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
The motion to remove from the table is passed 9-0. Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council withdraw temporary ordinance 11-19 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to withdraw temporary ordinance 11-19 star. Ms. Downhour, would you like to provide any commentary?
Sure. This ordinance was in correspondence to the tax levy, which failed in November. Therefore, the ordinance is no longer necessary.
Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion to withdraw. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 11-19 has been withdrawn. Is there further action on tabled resolutions tonight? Mr. Groff.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council withdraw from the table temporary ordinance 20-19.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to remove from the table temporary ordinance 20-19. As a privileged motion, there is no discussion. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Motion to remove from the table is passed 9-0. Mr. Groff.
Yes, Mr. President, this particular legislation is in relation to the property known as Timber Top, and per the recommendations of the Planning Commission recommending some zoning changes and the public hearing that they had, this will be replaced with a different piece of legislation as soon as we deal with this one of 20-19 star.
Very good. Would you like to make that amendment, please?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council amend resolution, temporary ordinance 20-19 to 20-19 star.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to amend temporary ordinance 20-19 and replace it with temporary ordinance 20-19 star. Further discussion, Mr. Groff?
Just to note that this, after we take action on this, it will be tabled until the first of the year, as there is a scheduled public hearing on this piece of legislation on January 13th of 2020.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Groff. Further discussion on the motion to amend. Ms. Bobbitt.
Okay, so you're changing it to 2019 star. What's actually changing on this? Did we go over that?
We added the attachment.
Okay.
That is what it is.
That full attachment was
Okay.
added to the legislation.
Okay.
Okay, further discussion on the motion to amend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodard?
Yes.
Motion to amend passes 9-0. We are now dealing with temporary ordinance 20-19 star. Mr. Groff.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council remove to the table temporary ordinance 20, or place on the table temporary ordinance 20-19 star.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to place on the table temporary ordinance 20-19 star. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt?
Yes.
Mrs. Downauer?
Yes.
Mr. Groff?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
Mrs. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Woodchard?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 20-19 star is placed on the table. Is there any further ordinance to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to old business or unfinished business, and I know the mayor would like to sort of reprise some of what he discussed regarding NOPEC from the Finance Committee meeting. Mr. Mayor, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. So a number of years ago, the Ohio legislature, in the current deregulated environment, saw fit to pass legislation that deregulated the electric and gas industries and rates in the state of Ohio, in realizing that it was an extremely complicated process for homeowners to take advantage of deregulation. They passed additional laws facilitating the aggregation of electric and gas utilities just to allow homeowners to take advantage. So included in that was the provision that resulted in the opt-out process when a city or a municipality passes an aggregation law. And about 15 years ago, the voters of Lancaster passed a provision for the city to participate in electric aggregation. We have been doing that the last 2 3-year periods. We have utilized First Energy, a company based out of Northern Ohio. And as a result of the aggregation, the city is required to go out every 3 years and find the best deal or the best rates for our citizens. So about a year ago, we became aware of NOPEC, which stands for Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council. That organization is a not-for-profit entity that's governed by a board of directors made up of mayors, county commissioners, township trustees, and several other different elected officials. I know there's at least one county engineer among that group. That organization has 230 communities or municipalities, 235 that are members, and that board of directors is elected by the 235 communities that are members. So the way it works is we will no longer be required to go out every 3 years and go out for bid and go through the whole bureaucratic process of determining the best rate, because NOPEC, as an organization of governments, is going to take care of that process for us. So this year, as is required every 3 years, you or the residents have received letters, and not everyone received a letter. There are 16,000 residences or homes in Lancaster. 6,000 of those homes participated in the First Energy aggregation. The other 10,000, in some method or another, has made the election to participate with some other power provider. And let's talk about that. AEP Ohio, which is the company that sends you your electric bill every month, is just a service company. They provide the poles, the lines, the trucks, the staff, and the billing service to deliver power to your home. That power can come from any number of power producers. AEP Energy is one, First Energy is one. If you go on the Ohio website, energychoice.ohio.gov, you will see dozens of power providers with rates all over the board. So, of the 16,000 residencies in the city of Lancaster, 10,000 of them have elected some other power provider at some point. The 6,000 that were First Energy aggregation customers did receive the letter, and they will be switched to the NOPEC system unless they opt out by either returning the form that was attached to the letter or by calling NOPEC at the number that is on the letter. So this is our judgment as to how the city residents can get the best rate for electricity. And NOPEC actually offers 4 different plans that you can choose from. One is the standard program, which changes every 4 months. And the rate that we begin with is under the standard program. It's 4.799 cents per kilowatt hour. It will change after April. They also have a variable rate which changes every month. And just like a variable rate mortgage that you might get on your house, the variable rate is the lowest. If you go to a fixed rate program, it's higher because they have to take into consideration what might happen to the rates over the term of the contract or the term of the mortgage if we're talking about financing a home. The other 2 plans are a 12-month fixed rate and a 24-month fixed rate. So after the first 4 months, you will have the opportunity to stay on the standard program rate, go to a monthly variable rate, or a 12-month or a 24-month fixed rate. We know this is a complicated process. The city contracting with NOPEC is our attempt based on the state law that was passed to make the process as easy as possible. If you want to go with NOPEC, the only thing you have to do is throw the paperwork that you got from them away, and you'll be switched from First Energy to NOPEC on January 1st. To determine who your power provider is, look at your Ohio AEP electric bill, and on page 2, down on the left-hand side, there is 2 sections of the bill. One is the fee that AEP Ohio gets for providing the poles, the lines, the trucks, the linemen, and the billing service, and that doesn't change. That doesn't change based on who provides the power. The other section will tell you who generates the power that you're receiving through your line. It could be AEP Energy, it could be First Energy, it could be any number of other companies that provide that service. So I'm not sure I included everything I did in the first round, so did I miss anything, or are there any questions?
South Central customers are not.
South Central power customers are not eligible because it's a co-op. Also, anybody that's on the PIP plan is not eligible for aggregation.
Okay. So that is helpful information, Mayor. Thank you. Who has questions? Mr. Stoughton.
Oh,
I see you
you're going to
gesticulating.
pick me last.
Yeah, I was going to wait, yeah.
Well, no, I talked to the law director after the finance committee meeting because I don't believe I opted to do a different plan, nor did he. So he's going to check with NOPEC to say why and the auditor is shaking her head. There's a whole bunch of us here that didn't get letters, much like you, that are wondering.
And I did not get a letter, and according to my AEP Ohio bill, AEP Energy is my power supplier. I don't know how that happened, but I will be electing NOPEC by calling a number that will be published here in the next couple of days to tell NOPEC that you want to sign up with them.
Yeah, and I went and looked at my bill, and I am a First Energy 0.546, kilowatt hour rate, which we believe is the rate that we had.
Right. So if you did not get a letter and you would like to select NOPEC as your power provider, the first thing you need to do is check to find out who is, and then determine by calling them if there is any kind of a contract period that you've signed up for. And if you look at the energychoice.ohio.gov, and you can see all the different power generators, there are any number of different deals and contract terms and penalties for opting out or for terminating your agreement before it matures. So you need to find out what your deal is, what you need to do to get out of it, if anything, maybe nothing, and then contact NOPEC either at the end of your deal with some other power provider or immediately to tell them that you want to use their service.
So I spoke with the clerk, and we're going to, we can't help you figure out who your provider is. You have to look at your bill to figure out who it is currently and then contact them for additional information. But if you didn't get a letter, if you're interested in more information, we're going to post the contact info on the city website so that those of you who haven't gotten a letter and want more information can contact NOPEC and get that. So in the next day or two, head to the city website to find that contact information. Law Director.
Thank you, President. Well, I just wanted to I will follow up with NOPEC letters, as Councilman Stoughton said. It sounds like we might be missing some letters, because I will tell, since I did the contract 3 years ago, what's supposed to happen is everybody that's on the first energy aggregation program, the mayor I know stated January 1, but there's different meter reading dates throughout the city. So you're supposed to come off and go from First Energy to NOPEC on your January read date, whenever that could be. It might be the first of the month. It might be more towards the end of the month. Also, I can tell you that if you are with First Energy and you're in the aggregation program, the answer to the question about a fee there is none. It's zero. That was the contract or whatever that we negotiated with them 3 years ago. So I will follow up, because it seems odd to me that some folks, including myself, aren't getting letters when I know for a fact that I'm in the aggregation program, without a doubt. So I will follow up on that, and I'll get information back to you.
Thank you, Law Director Ullum. Are there further questions or comments on NOPEC or the aggregation issue right now?
Well, and I think, again, to emphasize, if you're confused and haven't gotten the letter, we join you, because there's several of us on council and in the city administration have the same problem, so we'll all be looking into it.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Woodger. Anything else on this issue? Is there other unfinished business this evening someone would like to address? Is there any new business this evening? If not, I have just a couple of things. It was mentioned in finance, and we'll just say congratulations again to the Lancaster Fire Department. They received a couple of grants lately, and specifically the Columbia Gas of Ohio grant for $5,000 that they just received for their very creative video. Many Lancaster residents and others went and voted for the fire department, and so we are glad and congratulate you on that. We were supposed to have had a presentation tonight on the 2020 census that's coming up. That was going to take a little longer than we had anticipated, so we have postponed that presentation until either later in January or early February. But I will say that there are a couple of things that this body needs to do. One, we need to pass a resolution creating what's called a complete count committee. And so in the next meeting or two, either the last meeting in December or the first meeting in January, we will bring that resolution forward that appoints a chairperson and then also appoints the committee at large that is meant to sort of be the publicity committee that helps to push out information about how important it is to respond to the census. And so the mayor and I think will work on this. As we've had conversations, this council then can pass a resolution appointing that committee. And so if there are people that you would like to serve on that committee, it says probably 5 to 8 people is about the size of the committee for a city like Lancaster. So consider that. Send your names to the mayor or I, and then we can have discussions about who we're going to appoint to that committee as we go forward. We do need tonight to appoint or reappoint, as it were, members to a committee, which name I do not recall. Law Director Ullum, you're going to have to help me out here. It's the Reserve Officer.
Volunteer and Reserve. peace officer
something or another.
dependent fund.
That's what it is. Very good. And so what this does is this is a committee that meets typically once a year. They meet to appoint an at-large member, and then I think we only have 2 reserve officers on the roster. Is that right?
Yes, that's
For
correct.
the
Now
city
we
of
do,
Lancaster.
yes.
And so this fund is required by Ohio Revised Code. If something were to happen to one of those officers in the line, this fund comes along and helps to pay out some dollars to them. It is a requirement. I have served in one of those positions. Chief McDaniel is one of the positions from the law enforcement side. There are 2 from the law enforcement side, 2 from council side, and then those 4 come together to appoint a final 5th member. And so we need a motion tonight to reappoint myself and one other member of council, and it doesn't really matter. It can be anyone who will be sitting on council as we go into this next year. And so Mr. Hall, Mr. Schoonover, or any of the rest of you sitting around, don't all run for the hills at the same time. We typically meet maybe once, and that's about that, so it's not a significant investment of time. Ms. Bobbitt?
So will Don still be representing
Yes.
law?
Right, so he would be ineligible for the
Okay, that
council
was my
appointment,
question.
yes, because he's representing the law enforcement side. So if someone wants to make an announcement, they're they're debating over here which one's gonna.
Rock, paper, scissors.
You pick.
Me pick?
need
Yeah,
to
we'll
make
need
a
a motion, if one of you's willing to do it, and that'll need to come.
Either one of us are willing to do it.
So who's gonna make the motion?
I'll make a motion that Mr. Schoonover be appointed since he's been on council the longest.
Okay, and then reappointment of myself, if you'll include in that
And
motion.
reappointment of Mr. Rule.
Thank you very much. So we have a motion.
Second.
Mr. Stoughton, whose
I
name
move the
didn't come in
nominations be
that. Yes. So we'll be appointing myself and Mr. Schoonover to that committee, and then we'll receive information from the law director about what we'll need to do next. Further discussion on that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Schoonover.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I have recently read a decision by some court, maybe the Ohio Supreme Court, that any appointments made by a council must be done by roll call vote and not by just yea or nay.
Can you turn your microphone off, please? All right, so we're going to.
I want your appointment to be official and held up.
Yeah, we got to get this one right.
There was only if it was contention, but.
The clerk wants to argue and say it's only if it's contentious.
No, I thought that's what it was.
Oh, yeah.
We'll leave it to the law director to make that determination.
Well, now you made it contentious.
Okay.
All right.
Are you ready for your roll call?
Let's call the roll then,
Do I abstain?
if you want.
Mrs. Bobbitt,
Yes.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Groff,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
Mrs. Teener,
Yes.
Mr. Woodard.
Yes.
Well, boy, that took way longer than I'd hoped. Motion carries 9-0. No more recognition of the mayor. We're moving forward. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So I sent out an email recently to council members that you also need to appoint another member to the,
Oh, yes. I remember this.
and
Hold on,
I
the
forget the
Housing
name of that
Authority.
too. Previously, you appointed Brad Hutchinson and Donna Fox Moore to the housing, what's the name of the?
The Community Housing
Commu-
Council.
Yeah, Community Housing Authority or something.
something like that.
You appointed Brad Hutchinson and Donna Fox Moore with an alternate as Lindy Jackson. Brad Hutchinson has elected or asked to be excused from that duty, and I appointed Lindy Jackson as one of my representatives. So you need to come up with another appointment. Doesn't have to be tonight, but sometime in the fairly near future.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like something we'll do at a future meeting. So if you guys have thoughts on who that may be, I don't remember who else was on that list, Ms. Bobbitt.
I had recommended Susan Secoy because she had a great resume in regards to that.
No, if you don't mind to send that back out to council, and then anyone else who has nominations, we'll work on that in the next meeting or two. If you have someone who's interested, please check with them first and make sure they're willing to serve. And then once you have confirmed that, send out some information about them to all of City Council, and we can consider that appointment in a very near future meeting. Other new business this evening. I would like to ask 3 council members, Mr. Stoughton, Mr. McDaniel, and Ms. Downhour, to agree to schedule a special meeting of Lancaster City Council for the coming year, January 2nd, at 6 p.m. for our organizational meeting, where, per the rules of council, we must nominate a president pro tem and clerk of council. The president pro tem will then go about the work of putting committees together for recommendation to the council at large at our very first official meeting, our regular meeting of the new year. And so, are you three willing to make that request? Yes. I see heads nodding in all ways, and so we'll schedule that special meeting of council per the rules of council for January 2nd, 6 p.m. Location to be determined. We'll see if this room is available. If not, we'll be over in City Hall in the upstairs conference room. Any further new business this evening? If not, I'd like to take a moment to wish each one of you and all of those here, as well as everyone watching, a very happy and blessed Thanksgiving. With that, we'll move on to announcements of scheduled meetings.
Next regular session of council, December 16th at 6:30 p.m. The meeting following, January 13th at 6:30 p.m. At that time, we will have a public hearing on temporary ordinance 20-19 star. The oath of office is going to take place on Monday, December 30th at 6 p.m. at Olivedale Senior Citizen Center. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Code Enforcement, December 2nd at 7:30 a.m. at City Hall, 1897 room. IT Telecom, December 5th at 7:30 a.m. at the City Hall, 1897 room. Law Committee, December 12th at 9 a.m. at the Fairfield County Municipal Court Community Room. Public Works, December 13th at 7:30 a.m. at the Lancaster Public Transit Conference Room. And finally, Finance Committee, December 16th at 6 p.m. at Council Chambers.
And note our other two special meetings we just scheduled.
Yes, I should note those too. Sorry about that.
So
December 17th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers, and the organization meeting January 2nd at 6 p.m. to be determined location.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills this evening?
One bill, PNC, payment to MNCO for publication of legislation in the amount of $76.90.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
A motion and a second to pay the bills. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Is there a need for an executive session this evening? Seeing none, a motion to adjourn is in order.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving.
Legislation to sign.